In this video, I'm going to give you the truth about using the base model M1 MacBook Air in real world situations as a YouTuber, musician and writer. Hey guys, I'm Tyler, thank you for tuning back into the channel once again. If you're new around here, don't forget to hit the like button and also the subscribe button and notification bell too to keep updated with my latest videos. So this video is a little bit of a departure from my usual content, but it's one that is definitely pertinent to my life. I've always been a huge Apple fanboy. I'm going to be unashamed about that. I have a ton of Apple products and I'm always keen on the new products and what's coming out, as well as just being a huge tech fan. And that's always sat alongside my musicianship. I've always had a passion for tech as well as being a musician. So this video is really just a development of that, a development of the channel, and me trying to put out my opinions, my views, and things that are important to me. And tech is one of them, and it is a crucial part of my workflow no matter what I'm doing. So that's going to be a branch that's really added to the channel over the next year or so. I want to add some more stuff based around what I'm doing in my life, really. And a lot of that is music production. It's YouTube, as you guys see these videos on the channel. And tech's just a part of it no matter what I'm doing. One of the big things to happen in tech recently is the Apple M1 Silicon. The release of Apple Silicon is a big thing. The capabilities of it are really quite special. But I think what I've experienced is different to what a lot of people on YouTube are saying, and I think that really needs to be, we need to kind of cut through that. A lot of you guys have said about how honest I am about products on my channel, and I really want this to be an opportunity for me to again be really honest with people and hopefully help a broader audience. So as you can tell from the intro, my primary use of a Mac is professional work, and using effectively what is a first iteration of a machine is definitely no way to do professional work. And before you all jump in the comments and say, oh, why are you using this to try and do work? Obviously, there's going to be problems. Well, the reason I'm using it is because a lot of YouTubers out there are saying you can use this professional work and saying that this is the first kind of pro MacBook Air. And the second reason is that my 2018 MacBook Pro, my regular MacBook Pro that I've used to create all the videos on my channel pretty much, was in for a battery replacement. And I didn't want to be without a Mac because so much of what I do is Mac related. So almost all of the money I make is through my Mac one way or another. So to be without a Mac for, a few days even, most of a week would have been a struggle. So I decided to just go to the Apple Store, and as I put my MacBook in for a replacement for the battery, I decided just to pick up the base model Space Gray MacBook Air, which you can see here, in order to see me through, to see whether I could genuinely do that. And the intention was, if I could do that work, I would keep this and I would sell the MacBook Pro with the replaced battery. But spoiler, I'm going to be keeping the replaced battery 2018 MacBook Pro, and this is going to be going back to the store. I'm going to break this video up into 3 parts. The first will be looking at it from a writing perspective, any of those kind of tasks where you're sat in front of a computer, be that spreadsheets, writing, those creative productivity apps, and looking at this and how practical and useful this Mac is for those kind of things. The second aspect will be looking at this from a YouTuber, but really it applies to anyone doing video type, photo type material. And then the third aspect will be as a musician, which is critical to my channel. Is the primary function of this channel is musicianship. And I'm going to be looking at it from that perspective and giving you my opinions about how this laptop performs in all 3 areas in the real world. There will not be a single benchmark in this video because, if I'm honest, benchmarks are pretty much completely meaningless. And this will be really my real world feedback on what I've been doing, my use cases, using it as I want to use it, not just using a small clip and doing the same benchmark that everybody does for a few seconds. This is going to be actually how it feels in the real world to use this MacBook Air M1 with Apple Silicon. And does it benefit me, does it not? You'll get all of those answers at the end of this video. So first, I'm going to dive into the writing aspect of this machine. So from the writing perspective, I think the M1 MacBook Air is a lovely machine. And I think the form factor is the thing that first drew me to it. The fact that it's so small. I was hoping that overall this MacBook Air could justify being so small and light and fanless and have the power still to do what I do most days. Writing on this machine is really a joy. The keyboard is easy to use. It feels much better than my 2018 MacBook Pro with those butterfly keys. We're back to proper scissor switches with real travel. And for me, they feel a lot better than I remember. I use my Bluetooth Apple keyboard, and The travel on these is much nicer, it feels great, and I really actually enjoy typing and writing content on this MacBook. The form factor is a great feature. It just allows me to sit on a sofa, to sit anywhere really, and be very comfortable. And the fact that it's very lightweight allows me just to put the MacBook where I'm comfortable, even if that's on the sofa, which is not ideal for using a laptop, but at the same time, many of us are sitting on sofas, sitting next to partners, doing things, being productive whilst trying to use, spend free time, spend quality time with people. And that's a real benefit. Compared to my 2018, it's a joy. One of the biggest factors of me choosing this MacBook Air was the silent factor. As soon as I heard that there were going to be no fans in it, I was really excited because my 2018 Mac has been known to get quite hot and it does get quite noisy. The fact that this MacBook Air is silent really does make it feel like a step up. It feels like a development of technology rather than the same odd things, and it does feel like a more futuristic laptop, what we would expect of a laptop. And I think things like the iPad have really made us come to expect performance without noise. The other thing I'd say that I do enjoy is the fact that the keyboard lights up, but only on touch. It's much better than the old system of having the keyboard consistently lit up or not lit up at all. At first, when I got the Mac, I was looking for the keyboard switches to turn the lights off, but actually having them come on when you're typing and then come off when you're just browsing or using the trackpad is a really smart way to go about it, and gives you back some more options and some more function keys up at the top of the MacBook. As a writer, I'd say this machine is really well suited to you. So long as you're not doing anything that's too demanding, I think it's probably the ideal machine. It's easy to throw in a bag, lightweight to carry around, and you can get it out and be productive wherever you are. The fact that you can sync it up with your iCloud and say, have notes on your phone or write parts on your phone. I think that's something that I do a lot in my workflow, is that I might start an idea on the phone and maybe then complete it on a laptop and make sure it's all formatted in a nice way. And the fact that it all ties together using the Apple ecosystem, using iCloud, is great as a writer. If you're writing, doing Excel, spreadsheets, anything that's within that kind of realm of looking at a computer and inputting data to the computer, I find it hard to suggest that this MacBook Air wouldn't be ideal for you. It's a really great laptop for those kind of tasks. Next, I'm going to look at how this machine performs as a YouTuber and doing those more video intensive and photo intensive tasks. The first thing that I was struck by when running this Mac was the speed of M1 compatible apps like Affinity. Affinity Photo is my go-to editor for photos, and it really does feel a little bit snappier than it does on an Intel machine. The moment you start it, you just click the icon and within a couple of seconds you have it up and running with your content. While Affinity ran really well, I found that Final Cut was a little bit of a different story for me. Despite it obviously being an M1 optimized app, it's owned by Apple, and my workflow is primarily an M1 native workflow. I found that it really did not perform in the way that I'd expected it to. No matter what I did and what I was inputting, if I had two different codecs with different formats of video on my Final Cut timeline, it would immediately bring up memory issues and crashes. Multiple times I sat with my RAM pretty much almost maxed out, where it's sitting around 7.5 gig, and obviously this is only an 8 gig machine, so it's really not much headroom to be left. And I came across things I'd never come across in the entire life of my 2018 MacBook Pro, including crashes and just freezes of Final Cut. That was one thing that I was not expecting at all. I was expecting Final Cut to be one of the programs that really did sell this MacBook and make me want to stay within this ecosystem of the M1, but it really didn't. Running two different clips at different resolutions, it struggled consistently. They were quite long clips. I mean, they were half-hour clips, but just two of them. And things like every time I cut a clip would cause a number of issues. First, it would just slow down and beach ball. Secondly, once I'd cut that area out, sometimes I'd then have audio issues, so it would drop out the audio completely. And the only way to remedy it was to plug a headphone into the headphone jack and then unplug it again. And that would then reset the sound, and I could carry on editing with the built-in speakers. As I say, for the majority of my time while I was editing in Final Cut, my RAM was sitting at right around the 7 gig mark out of 8. And whenever it went up to 7.4, 7.6, the computer really did pretty much stop, or, as I experienced, just completely crash, and I had to just hold down the power button until it reset itself. In general, I think this computer is pretty RAM hungry and does seem to sit at about 6 gig no matter what you're doing. So even just with my few apps installed, I've got far fewer than I run on my 2018 Mac. Just with the few that I have installed, it's already sitting at 6 gig. So if you've really got anything running in the background, this Mac is going to struggle. I think titles and animations were roughly equivalent to what I've come to expect from my 2018 Mac. There were definitely drop frames, which is the same with my 2018, but I really thought, being it with M1 native and running on Apple Silicon with Apple optimized GPUs, it might run a little bit smoother, but really some cases it was a little bit quicker, some cases it was definitely slower. So that's another point that's a little bit disappointing. The final things I would say to wrap up the video editing and YouTuber type section of this video is it does get hot. If you're doing a video edit for maybe an hour, 2 hours, it does get pretty warm. And I'd rather it had a fan at that point. I would be looking at a MacBook Pro for those instances. And also it is slow to render and export. Whilst it does look quick in some benchmarks and come out quickly depending on the type of format of video you're using, I found that it was no quicker than my 2018. Ultimately, I'd say the performance was worse than my 2018 MacBook Pro in Final Cut running on Intel, and 16 gig is an absolute must. If you're going to do any serious video work, you need to have 16 gigs of RAM. Yes, maybe some YouTubers are running short clips of 8K, or they're running 5 minutes of 4K footage, or running a Bruce X benchmark, but in honesty, that's not really a real world function, and that's not really what anybody's actually doing in the real world. So no matter what numbers you're getting on those, I don't think you can do a proper video edit on this machine with only 8GB of RAM. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit the like button and hit that notification bell to keep updated with my latest videos. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the M1 MacBook so far. What's your experience been with it with video editing? The final area I'm going to look at this MacBook is as a musician. The thing that first drew me to this MacBook Air was the idea of being fanless as a musician. So often I will record something and there'll be a little bit of fan noise from a home studio recording, or I'll get a stem from someone and there's fan noise from a computer, particularly MacBooks. So the idea of having a fanless Mac for music production is a real joy. That definitely is the case. Being fanless, you can record things without worrying about noise, and I do really enjoy that aspect of this Mac. However, more broadly, I think this Mac is super limited from a music making perspective as it stands. The first problem when coming up with a new architecture and being a musician is how reliant we are on hardware. Things like this Apollo Twin are completely useless if you have an M1 Mac. Until Universal Audio can make this 2019 device compatible with M1, it is completely useless despite being a recent piece of technology. And that's just the architecture change means that as a musician, taking on new technology is a slow process. So this really high quality £700 interface is useless and means that I can't use it. Even interfaces like this, which is the Apogee Duet, this is an old interface from 2014 and it does work with M1 Macs because it's built on core audio drivers, so the standard audio driver for Apple products. But because it's the old version and the Maestro software doesn't work, it's really an absolute pain to get things to work. I use this to get a remote session done. So one of my regular workflows is just as a remote session bass player or mandolin or guitar, I'll lay down a track and send it to someone. And my experience was that doing it with an M1 Mac took me so much longer than when I was on my 2018 MacBook Pro. And I did this while I didn't have that Mac, so I had no choice. But just getting this interface to change from using the guitar impedance and inputs to the mic inputs was a pain. I ended up installing the Apogee Maestro software on my girlfriend's laptop on her Windows machine and changing it there. That was the only choice I really had. The Apogee Duet is also meant to be really highly compatible and interlinked with Logic, and that was also hit and miss running Big Sur on the M1 Mac. Sometimes Logic would pick it up and I could change the gain level from Logic itself, but a lot of the time it didn't recognize it, didn't recognize it correctly, and it definitely worked in and out just using core audio to hear what was going on, but a lot of the times changing inputs, changing aspects of the interface wasn't possible and just didn't happen. The only audio interfaces that are currently compatible with M1 Macs are those that run on core audio drivers, and the majority of them are not high quality interfaces. This Apogee Duet is probably about as high quality as they get, with the exception being the Symphony Desktop, which is the newer Apogee interface. But outside of Apogee and a couple of Focusrite interfaces like the Scarlett, which are low-end interfaces with not as high-quality conversion, you're really stuck, and so M1 is just not really an option if you need to use external hardware with your Mac in your workflow on M1. Well, that's definitely going to change. Unfortunately, that is the reality of it, and it kind of hampers all productivity when it comes to being a musician with M1 if you're recording. If you're producing, you can definitely still mix using the built-in headphone jack, but you really want to be using higher quality converters for that kind of work from an audio interface. And if your interface isn't compatible, which is the case for most of them and most of us, then you really have no choice other than to stick with your Intel Mac. The other thing I found was that even in Logic, there were tons of bugs on really simple projects. That remote session that I was doing where I wanted to simply lay down some bass and then lay down some mandolin for a client, that took me a lot longer than it should have done because of basic things like compressors not reacting the way they were supposed to in Logic. So the dial went up to the amount of compression that you'd applied and then it wouldn't come back down again. So for a lot of the time I want to just be able to see and have that reassurance of adding maybe minus 3 dB of compression going in on bass, or a little bit on the mandolin, a little bit of parallel compression. Those things I just did not have the option of seeing, and so it kind of slowed me down. It definitely slowed down my workflow, and even restarting that plugin I still got the same interface issues. Another issue I had was that the playhead was constantly moving, and even if I dragged it back and I was paused, it would still carry on moving through Logic even though it wasn't actually playing anything back. It's little things like that just slow it down and just make it impractical and not really usable in the real world. Whilst yes, you may be able to run 900 and something Alchemy plugins or however many Space Designer reverbs in a benchmark, that's not practical and no one really needs that or does that. If you're using that many reverbs in a mix, I doubt you're going to get something that sounds good. What we need is practical things where you can use different tools and a little bit of each, and say have them on a bus and have them somewhere else, and a little bit of each everywhere as you do with a mix. And that's practical real world analysis, and in that this really doesn't quite live up to the expectation that I had, especially being an Apple M1 optimized app. The last thing I'd say about making music on an M1 Mac at the minute is that a lot of people are suggesting you should run plugins, install your plugins and then run them in Rosetta mode, and then run the whole of Logic in Rosetta mode as well, in order to enhance the amount of CPU usage you're getting and make it run smoother. But for me, if you're going to do that, there is really no point in having an M1 Mac. I would stay away from that for the minute. Stick with your Intel stuff. My Intel machine is never really maxed out, no matter what I'm doing, no matter how big a session is. It is never going to be maxed out. The CPU has always got at least 30% left, 30% headroom at the very minimum. And so I'd stick with your Intel Macs. Music making is really not that demanding, particularly if you're being sensible on busing things, putting reverbs on buses rather than running them on individual channels. Being minimal and being productive and using and organising your sessions well is going to really be the best thing you can do for running a project. And for that, I don't really think you need an M1 Mac, and I would stick with Intel if you're going to just be making music. Keep with that until the hardware is all compatible, and I'd say skip a generation or two until M1 Macs have really come to fruition, hardware is compatible, companies have made the drivers and they have them running quickly, efficiently, speedily and reliably. If you're a musician, I just wouldn't go for an M1 Mac right now. So those are my thoughts on the M1 MacBook Air base model. It is a lovely machine, no doubt. I do enjoy using it, I do enjoy the feel of it, but only in certain tasks, and for a lot of tasks it is just incredibly frustrating in the real world using it. Ultimately, this machine is not powerful enough for me. As a professional doing work on this machine, it's just not ready and I need more RAM. Maybe 6 months down the line, when it's slightly more well optimized, when the bugs are gone, when Final Cut has been fully updated and is running absolutely like butter on this machine, maybe that's the time where I will look at it and go, actually this machine would be a great option. But right now this machine is not right for me, and in the real world testing it has brought more frustration than joy. If you're a writer, I really strongly advise that this is a great laptop and a great choice. Even if you're doing spreadsheets, anything that inputs data, it's a great choice of machine and you won't be upset. You'll be really happy with this machine. Using it for heavier, more demanding video, no, I just can't see how this machine is ready for that. The fact that my RAM was constantly maxed out and the little bugs like the speakers and the audio dropping out and the memory crashes, the number of times that it crashed, it just wasn't really acceptable and just drove me mad. So if you're going to use one of these for video editing, at least give it 16 gigs of RAM and then maybe give it a go. That's something I was considering, but in all honesty, I think I'm just going to sit it out and wait for a more powerful M processor, and probably it will be in the rumored 14.1 or 16-inch MacBook Pro, and maybe then I'll have a tough decision to make. But right now, with the heat and the stutters and just really the lack of performance improvement and productivity improvement, I won't be keeping this MacBook for video editing. Finally, as a musician, I just cannot recommend this machine. I loved the idea that it was fanless, and I was hoping that that would be the thing that really justified it for me. But I'm afraid you're just going to spend more time being frustrated and trying to get things to work than you are being creative and outputting work. So from that perspective, as a musician, this machine is just not ready, and I'd advise you stick with as strong an Intel machine as you can use, and just stick with that for now and wait it out for hardware to become more compatible, at which point M1 will be fully optimized, the M series will really have come to fruition, and that might be 2 or 3 generations down the line. But being that music making isn't that demanding a task, I don't think that's a problem. And if you're looking to upgrade your Mac for music making, say from a 2012 or a 2014, I'd look at the 2018 Macs, 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro secondhand rather than looking at an M1. So those are my conclusions on the M1 MacBook Air base model. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Overall, I just wanted to put this video out there because I think so many YouTubers are hyping this product and saying that it can do everything and be everything, and really it's just not in the real world. Whilst running a benchmark, it comes out great and scores really well. It scores better than my MacBook Pro. In the real world, I miss my MacBook Pro so much, and I left the Apple Store with it battery serviced and replaced, feeling like I'd bought a new product. I had that Apple feeling coming away from it. Whereas with this 13-inch MacBook Air, I've never been so desperate to kind of take a product back. And I just wanted to get this out there and let people know that, yes, for certain workflows, it's a great machine. It's nippy, it's fast, and it is definitely the future, but it's not ready right now for real productivity in terms of video or as a musician. If there's anyone there strongly considering going totally, binning the Intel Mac and going straight for the M1, doing what I do as a musician or video editing, I just wholeheartedly can advise, just don't do that right now. Wait it out. It's not going to be worth it, and you will just sit there frustrated and without another Mac to turn back to. Ultimately, this Mac isn't ready for pro work yet. The platform will be, and I can see it being great down the line with the 2nd gen, 3rd gen, or even just these new MacBook Pros that are on the horizon. But that's my conclusion. If you want to do pro work, the M1 is really not ready yet. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'm going to be doing more tech videos, more music production videos. They're going to be coming. So if that's something you're interested in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. My Instagram will be linked below, so don't forget to head over there and follow me if you want to see more content related to what I'm doing. And other than that, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.